You're listening to the Study Podcast with Dr. Paul Wegner. This is your host, Tyler Sanders. I'm here with Dr. Paul Wegner. He's going to give us the Hebrew word of the day and probably tell us what book we're going to read. We're going over today.
There we go. Today we're doing Habakkuk. And in my mind, it's one of the funnest books, I think, because it right in the middle of the book, Habakkuk changes. And he changes from a mouthy little prophet to one who is just standing back and trusting God, which, you usually in a book, you don't see it, the change so dramatically. Yeah. But before we go any further, can you look on the PowerPoint here and can you see where Habakkuk is? Last week we did Zephaniah. And remember, we talked about that these are as close to in chronological order as I could get them. And, there's still a bunch of questions, but it's trying to give you some logic of where they fit. And Habakkuk is got to be before 612 when the Babylonians took over Nineveh and conquered it. And it says in the book that even, God says he's going to use the Babylonians to punish the nation. But then he says, and even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. So that means that the Babylonians haven't really become a powerful nation yet. So in 612, they would have believed that the Babylonians were coming, but several years before that, they wouldn't have. So that's how we get our date for the book. So that's kind of fun. Okay.
And that's just telling us kind of where it can't be, right?
Yeah.
Is there some evidence to tell us kind of the other bounding side?
Well, this one doesn't have, a lot of times it tells like during the kings and stuff. This one doesn't have that. So that's why we're left with trying to look somewhere in the book to find it.
Okay.
All right. So you ready for your Hebrew word of today?
Yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah, this one is a little different. This one is actually a type of a verb, and it's a cohortative. Okay. A cohortative is one that's like an exhortation or an offer to join with somebody. So in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1, there are like 3 cohortatives right in a row. And one is, let me stand on my guard post, that let me stand. Let me station myself, that's another cohortative. And let me keep watch to see what he will speak to me. So there's 3 cohortatives kind of right in a row, which cohortatives are quite unusual. When you see them in Hebrew, you kind of look at it and say, oh man, that looks like an unusual form. And it is, but it's also there to give you like an exhortation, or the best way to translate it is usually let me or let us, depending on a singular or plural. But it's always first person. Okay. Yeah. And then the word ma means what or who, depending on the context. So that's our other one. I highlighted it because it actually can occur with a different number of vowels with it. Oh, yeah, it's got a pathic there. This next one has a comets. And so it shows up. There's a reason for that. And I don't know if you want to know it, but it's in a closed and accented syllable is why it's got a short vowel in the first one. Okay. So, but it's just interesting that it can appear with a couple of different kinds of vowels depending on where it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I knew you wouldn't be satisfied with that. So I actually got another one. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now this one is in chapter 3 of Habakkuk. And it starts off with a prayer, La Habakkuk. And the thing I want to talk about is that La. Because in the Psalms, you often have a Psalm, La David. And La can mean a lot of different things. It can mean to, for, according to, a whole bunch of different options. But I think this one is the best evidence that also shows you it could be authorship, that this is a prayer by Habakkuk. He actually wrote this prayer. And in the context, it certainly sounds like he's doing it. So it's interesting. Whenever I look at the psalm titles, I don't automatically assume that when it says La David, that means that David wrote it. It could have been written for David or according to David or, a lot of different options. or to David.
Yeah.
So a lot of different things, but context is usually our best way to try to figure out if he could have written it or not. Okay. Does that make sense? So I thought,
it does. Yeah.
There's your Hebrew word. It's a little preposition, but it can have a lot of different options. And once again, I didn't think you'd be satisfied with that. So I thought I'd show you that there's at the end of Psalm 3:1, it actually has according to the Shigionoth. And I don't know if you remember, but in Psalm 7:1, it also has that same whatever it is, whether it's a type of instrument according, upon the Shigionoth, or if it's a song according to the music of the Shigionoth. We don't actually know, but remember I told you that Psalm 3 is actually the prayer of Habakkuk. And so it fits in the Psalm category really, really well. And so even has some of the terminology. And to show you a little more, at the very end, in chapter 3, verse 19, the last verse, at the end it says, for the choir director on stringed instruments, or we think that's stringed instruments again, we don't know. But according to the choir director, is a lot of Psalms have that in its title. So I think it's kind of interesting. This one has several hints that this last chapter is a prayer by Habakkuk, and it's got some of the same structure as a psalm.
Yeah.
All right. Are you satisfied now?
I'm satisfied now. Yeah, that was a lot of Hebrew.
Yeah. I hope not too much for most of you, but I just thought it's interesting. There's a lot of hints in chapter 3 that suggest it's like a psalm structure.
Well,
all right.
It's always cool to see stuff like that in the text that's hinting towards those types of things.
And
they can be hard to catch sometimes in English,
Yeah, and sometimes we wouldn't notice that, like a prayer of Habakkuk, that la.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really helpful, because then it helps you to be a little more cautious when you look at a psalm title, not to assume that David wrote all those psalms that have his name in the title. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But this is my best evidence to suggest it really can mean authorship. And that is one of the possibilities. Yeah. All right. Let's get into the real text now. The book of Habakkuk has really got an interesting structure. It's got 3 parts. Well, it's got an introduction and an epilogue. So it has those. Okay. But then inside, you've got what I call the first cycle, then the second cycle, and then Habakkuk's prayers in chapter 3. So the cycle at the beginning, you've got Habakkuk complaining or lamenting, and then God responds. That's the first cycle. Then in the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, you've got Habakkuk complaining again and God responding. And so those are those 2 cycles. And then you've got the prayer of Habakkuk. So I think it's got a really clear structure on this one. So, which you don't always have, but Habakkuk's name, we don't actually know what it means. Some people thought it's one of those bottles that when you pour it, it goes book, 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 and that kind of is what his name Habakkuk kind of sounds like. So they think that might be a possibility. Yeah. Wow. I've dated it somewhere between 626 and 612. Probably a lot closer to the 626. Okay. Because by 612, they know Habakkuk or that Babylon's coming.
The Babylon.
The key verse is clearly the last 3 verses of the book. It's amazing. By that time, Habakkuk has changed his mind and he trusts God, which is kind of amazing because he starts off mouthing off to God. That's probably one of the reasons I like the book. And then the purpose, is Habakkuk learns to wait and trust on God, who works all things out for his glory. Judah will be punished by Babylon, then Babylon will be punished. So what you've got here is a pretty good structure as to how God does things. And so that's kind of what I like. And then at the bottom, I've got a little timeline there. In 722, 721, the northern kingdom was taken off into captivity. Then about 612, Nineveh was conquered by Babylon. And then in 586, you've got the deportation of Judah and taken off. So that gives you kind of a little structure of what events were happening then. So this is before Babylon becomes a powerful nation. So that would mean Assyria was still the powerful foe at that time. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. That's probably enough to get you us started. The author, we think it's Habakkuk. However, we don't know hardly anything about him. The introduction in this book is very short. It's one verse, and it just says that it's by the prophet Habakkuk. The date we've already talked about. It's got to be before 612. The historical situation is that Judah is about to be punished for her sins. Remember, Judah is punished by the Babylonians. So in that, they don't even know Babylon's really coming yet. This is actually a warning then. So God gives them, 20, 25 years to straighten up their act so that so that maybe they could skirt this punishment and get around it. But it seems like to me, God's very gracious if he's warning them that far in advance So I think that's part of the logic of why this book is so good. And then the purpose, Habakkuk learns to wait and trust in God. And that's kind of in the middle of the book. I'm going to try to show you where it changes, but man, it goes from him mouthing off to God to finally saying, I'm going to just sit back and wait and see what God does to deliver us. So that's just kind of amazing. All right, I'm going to read a verse for you. So you see, this is that part to let you know that they don't know that the Babylonians are coming yet. And the Chaldeans is another name for Babylon. All right, here's what it says. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder, because I'm doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. For behold, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous people who march through the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. So see, that's giving them a warning that here comes the Babylonians, and they had no idea that the Babylonians were anything they needed to fear.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that's that part. Okay, let's look at the first cycle. And I've got verses. What I want to do is I'll go through and explain what the parts are. Then we'll look at verses to confirm them. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Habakkuk's lament or complaint. And his first complaint is found in chapter 1, verse 2, and it's that God's not listening. And his second complaint is that God's not responding in that same verse. And then he's got a third one. His third complaint is he thinks he can do a better job of running the world than God is at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so you thought he's got quite a complaint here. All right, let's see what he says. All right. How long, O Lord, will I call out for help and you do not hear? So notice he's saying, I've been calling out to you, God, and you don't even listen. I cry out to you violence, yet you do not save. So God's not acting either. Why do you make me to see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists and contentions arise. Therefore, the law is ignored and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. Do you see what he's saying at the last part there? He's basically saying, why are you letting the wicked have such letting them do whatever they want, so much so that the world's in a mess? So that's basically Habakkuk saying, you're doing a terrible job of running this world. Yeah. Okay. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what God has to say. I've got this first. This is what Habakkuk's feeling. He believes that God does not care or is not interested. So he must feel he's not very important to God because God doesn't even listen to him. And shouldn't God come when I call him? That's kind of what he's assuming there. And doesn't God care about this rampant sin around us? And because he doesn't seem to be doing anything, it's just getting worse. Okay? Right. So Habakkuk's God is uninterested, too busy to care about Habakkuk, and he doesn't care about the wickedness around us. Okay? Now, we know that's not true, but that's Habakkuk's complaint. Right. So let's see what God's going to say to him. So here's God's response in verses 5 through 11. First, I am listening, and I do a very good job, and I'm doing something that you would not even believe it if I told you. That's verse 5. Second response, I'm acting, and I'm bringing the Babylonians to punish you. The third response, I do a perfect job of running the world. The Babylonians are efficient and thorough, but they will be punished. See, there's the key, I think. All right, let's see what it says. So here's the verses that confirm that. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder, because I'm doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. For behold, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous people who march through the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards and keener than wolves in the evening. Their horsemen come galloping, and their horsemen come from afar. They fly like eagles, swooping down to devour. So he's basically saying, okay, you thought I wasn't acting. Look what I'm doing. I'm bringing the Babylonians to come and get you. Now, here's Habakkuk thinking, wait a minute. Why are you bringing them against us? I agree we're wicked.
Yeah.
But why are you bringing those mean Babylonians against us? Okay?
Right.
Okay, so this is the dilemma that Habakkuk's facing. All right? This is on the explaining about who the Babylonians are. And there's one thing in here I want you to see. All of them come for violence. Their horde of faces move forward. They collect captives like sand. They mock at the kings, and rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress and heap up rubble to capture it. Then they will sweep through like the wind and pass on. Do you see what that's saying about the Babylonians? They are an amazing fighting force, and they're really efficient. Yeah. Now, here's the key, though. But they will be held guilty, they whose strength is their God. So God's saying, yes, I'm going to use them, but they're going to be punished also. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to go into the second cycle. So Habakkuk's just heard that God is working. He's bringing the Babylonians, and they're very efficient. So here, Habakkuk's first problem is someone might get hurt in this plan, verse 12, and he thinks it's them. Second problem is, why would you give your job to someone else, like the mean Babylonians? Why would you use them to punish us? And then the last one is, why would you use someone more wicked to punish someone less wicked? So he's basically saying that those Babylonians, look how mean they are and how cruel they are. They don't care about God. Look at us Israelites. We at least care about God. And you're using this more wicked people to punish the less wicked? That's his question, or that's his complaint.
It's a pretty interesting question, actually.
Yeah.
Those are really fascinating questions.
You just wait, though. God's got an answer, and it's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what he says. Here's Habakkuk's response. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We will not die. And I think you should put in there, will we? See, I think Habakkuk is terribly afraid that those Babylonians, they won't have any restriction on them at all. They come and wipe out nations. Are you going to let them wipe us out too? You know, I mean, I'm sure he's saying, God, you don't have to worry about this because you're all powerful and you live forever. But we don't.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. You, O Lord, have appointed them to judge, and you, O Rock, have established them to correct. Your eyes are too pure to approve evil, and you do not look on wickedness with favor. Why do you look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? So he's saying, those Babylonians are worse than us. Why are you using them? And in verse 15, the Chaldeans bring all them up with a hook, drag them away with their nets, and gather them together in their fishing nets. Will they therefore empty their nets continually, slay nations without sparing? So he's saying, are you just going to let them get off, basically?
Yeah.
All right. I've got Habakkuk's wickedness chart here. So here's the Israelites. They serve Yahweh. They don't overthrow other nations. Okay. The Babylonians, they serve other gods. They wipe out nations. They don't spare anyone. This should be an easy choice, right? The Babylonians are clearly worse than the Israelites. But here's God's wickedness chart. All our righteousness is as filthy rags. And here's Israel. They know better, but still they don't follow God. The Babylonians don't know any better, so they serve power, money, etc. So who's the more guilty one? Those who know better and don't do it, or those who don't even know better and do it? So there's God's response to him, I think. So God says, I can use whoever I want. And your wickedness is just as bad in my eyes as theirs. In fact, I wonder if you're more guilty. Does that make sense? Right. Okay. So
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. So here's Habakkuk's statement. Habakkuk thinks he's gone too far because in verse 13, when he says, why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? That's a pretty serious charge against God, right? Okay, so I think Habakkuk even expects reproof. So in verse 2 of chapter 2:1 says, I will wait and I will see what he will speak to me and how he will respond. And I think it should be translated, when I am reproved. So he even expects to be that he's actually gone too far and that he shouldn't have told God.
He'll get corrected.
Yeah, that's what he's thinking. Okay. And I expected God's response to be slap him, right? Habakkuk, you don't talk to God that way. But actually, that's not what God says. Here's God's response is in chapters 2 through 20. And it says, record the vision because it's going to happen. And then second, he talks about God's indictment. Babylon is proud and his soul is not right within him, and they will be punished. Okay, then they've got that key verse, but only the righteous will live by their faith. And in my mind, that's kind of a slam at both of them. We know the Babylonians are going to be punished, right? But I think he's also saying,
sure, right.
But so are you guys, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then starting at verse 7, the woes are pronounced on Babylon. Let me show you some of the passages so it makes some sense. So in verse 2 of chapter 2, it says, Then the Lord answered me and said, record the vision, inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for an appointed time. It hastens towards the goal. It will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it. For it will certainly come and it will not delay. I'll come back a minute. But think about this. Here's Habakkuk, knowing that God is going to punish them through probably one of the most efficient armies coming. Yeah. And he's got nothing to do but wait to see how bad they're going to punish him, right? I can see why that would scare Habakkuk. He then hears God's continues and says, Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. So I actually think that last phrase actually cuts both ways for the Israelites and also the Babylonians. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. That quote is interesting. In the New Testament, it's quoted 3 times, and each time it emphasizes a different word. In the Romans, it says the righteous one will live by his faith. So it's emphasizing the righteous person. In Galatians 3:11, it says the righteous one will live by his faith. So it emphasized the idea of living in faith. And in Hebrews 10, which is the faith chapter, 38 says the righteous one shall live by faith. And so it's emphasizing the idea of the faith that it takes. So it's kind of interesting. Here's that. The New Testament gets a lot of use out of that one little quote from Habakkuk.
Sure.
And it's interesting that it seems to emphasize different words each time of the context that it's in.
Right.
All right. Okay, then at the end of chapter 2, we've got all these woes. Remember, it did say, so it already got done saying the Babylonians are going to be punished. They're not right either. They are going to be punished. And then he gives there's like 5 woes here. Woe to him who steals. They will become plunder. Remember, that's the Babylonians were taking stuff from other people. And he says, well, guess what? They're going to become plunder too. And then woe to those who devise evil plans. Verse 9, your house will perish too. And then 3, woe to him who kills others. Verse 12, their evil plans will come to nothing. Verse 15, woe to those who take advantage of others. They will be disgraced and taken advantage of. So each one of these, the punishment basically fits the crime. So Babylon is going to get theirs too. And then number 5 is woe to the idol worshipers in verse 19. God alone will be feared. He will be worshiped. So it's really interesting. God, if Habakkuk thought Babylon was going to get off scot-free, here's to make sure they know they're not. Okay? All right, here's what the verses say. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Remember, that's a quote from Isaiah, or at least the same thing is said in chapter 11:9 of Isaiah.
Yeah.
And then 18 says, what profit is the idol and his maker when its maker has carved it, or an image, a teacher of falsehood? For its maker trusts in his own handiwork when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, to a mute stone, arise, and that is your teacher. Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver. There is no breath in it at all, but the Lord is in his holy temple. Let the earth be silent before him. That last verse is just amazing. You know, it's talking right before this, talking a lot about idols being nothing. But then it says, but the Lord is in his holy temple. Let the earth be silent before him. So it contrasts nothingness versus the God of all creation. So I think that's kind of neat too. All right. So that finishes verse 2 or chapter 2. Now we go into chapter 3. And remember, this one is totally different. So we've just been through the first 2 chapters where Habakkuk complains and God responds. Habakkuk complains again and God responds. So at this point, we got to see, okay, what is happening? And so Habakkuk is actually praying. And the first verse first 2 verses are amazing in my mind. He talks about having a new reverence. I have heard about you and I fear, it says in verse 2. Then I think he has a new faith. In verse 2, it also says, revive your works as in the past. So means I want to see, you know how you killed all those Egyptians in the Red Sea. I want to see that one again. Or with Gideon, wiping out the Midianites with only 300 men. That one's a good one. Let's see it. Or having the walls of Jericho fall down. Wouldn't that be neat to see again? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then he's got one more thing in chapter 2 or in verse 2. It says, in wrath, remember mercy. And that's kind of an interesting one because God is merciful, right? He's all mercy. So that's like telling God to be merciful. He says, I know you're going to punish. So I know, and you got wrath against sin, but please have some mercy on us. And I just think that's neat because God is total mercy. And yet there's still going to be punishment. All right, let's see what the verse is.
And it's an interesting perspective from Habakkuk too, right? To be able to say, I understand that this punishment is deserved. Yeah. Please be merciful. But that ask for mercy acknowledges that, that there's wickedness as well.
Yeah, good. Okay, here's what it says. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, according to the Shigionoth. That was at verse 1. Verse 2, Lord, I've heard about you, a report about you, and I fear. So I know what you can do, God. Oh, Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years, and in the midst of the years, make it known, meaning let's see some of those amazing works that you've done in the past. And then in wrath, remember mercy. Then it says, and God comes from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. Selah, his splendor covers the heavens, and his earth is part of his praise. His radiance is like the sunlight, his rays flashing from his hands, and there is a hiding of his power. Before him goes pestilence, and plague after him. He stood and surveyed the earth. He looked and startled the nations. Yes, the perpetual mountains were shattered. The ancient hills collapsed. His ways are everlasting. I'm sure you've heard of this, but you know what a theophanies is, Tyler?
Yeah, right. Kind of
what
an
is
appearance
it?
Of God.
Yeah. So here's basically an explanation of God, and it's covering some of the things like when they came back from the wilderness wanderings. It's almost that kind of that same thing. So here's God coming to do punishment, and he says he's coming from Teman or Paran, which was in Edom. And for some reason, Edom is often pictured as an enemy of God. So when God comes from there, it often is, it looks like when it comes like this, he's coming in power to punish them. Okay.
I see.
Yeah. So let's keep going here. The mountains saw you and quaked. The downpour of water swept by. The deep uttered forth its voice. It's lifting up its hands. Sun and moon stood in their places. They went away at the light of your arrows, at the radiance of your gleaming spear. In indignation, you marched through the earth. In anger, you trampled the nations. You went forth for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You struck the head of the house of the evil to lay them open from thigh to thigh. So here's God. So in the middle of the book, you've got these two complaints. Now you've got a picture of God coming to defend his people. In my mind, so if Habakkuk wondered if they were going to be wiped out, they were going to be punished, but that doesn't mean they're going to be totally destroyed, right? They'll be purified, meaning they're going to suffer punishment. But then what's going to come from that is a person who's obedient to God and one that trusts in him. Does that make sense? And Habakkuk is like a picture of those. Here, hang on, we're not done. Let me show you what it says. So in verse 16, it talks about Habakkuk being terrified, but he has no place else to turn but God. So he actually puts his trust in the one who can actually help him. So here's what the verse says. Yeah. I heard and my inward parts trembled. At the sound, my lips quivered. Decay entered my bone, and in my place I trembled, because I must wait quietly for the day of distress, for the people to arise who will invade us. So now that's, in my mind, that's really crucial. So here's Habakkuk knowing that God's going to punish them with the Babylonians, and all he can do is rely on God to protect them, that he won't be destroyed with them.
Yeah.
So I think what's happening is Habakkuk is changing from a prophet that mouths off to God and says, man, I think I could even do a better job of ruling this world than you, to one now that's sitting back and saying, I don't know what to do here, God. I've got to, who else can I go to but you? And I'm terrified. Yeah. So the only one I can go to is you. Now look at this next verse. And this one's the classic one, right? Though the fig tree should not blossom and there be no fruit on the vine, though the yield of the olive should fail and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold and there be no cattle in the stall, yet I will exalt in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. Do you see what that's saying? Habakkuk's got no reason to believe that he can ask God to deliver him, but he's got no place else to go but to God. Yeah. So he's going to rejoice in God himself because he believes that's the only one that can save him. Does that make sense? Right. So from being a mouthy little prophet to one who now has got nowhere else to turn but God, and he puts his life in God's hands. I just think that is amazing. You don't see that very often. And he's even admitting it's not by what I can see. It's only by trusting in you. So
yeah, that's right.
So I think that's great. All right. What made the difference? I think now he knows that God cares, because the minute God responded, Habakkuk knew he was listening. He knows that God's in control and not himself, because that's not the way he would have delivered his nation, right? To bring the Babylonians against him. So he knew he couldn't challenge God. God was so much mightier than him and could do things that Habakkuk couldn't even think of doing. And so he just sits back and says, I just put my life in your hands because I don't have any place else to go. And then number 3, God responds to Habakkuk in such an amazing way that Habakkuk knew he could not compete with God. And I put on here, God's ways are high above our ways. Sometimes God has to get us to that position before we actually will put our trust in him and not ourselves. And I think that's what just happened to Habakkuk. And I put on here, Habakkuk can trust in a God who can bring about these amazing things.
Yeah.
All right. One more. Here's the questions. All right. So what do we learn about from the book of Habakkuk?
I think a really interesting thing we see happen through this. I mean, we're getting so much in Habakkuk's perspective, right? And his fear or his concern is that God is inactive. Yeah. Like he's not paying attention, or if he is, he's not going to do anything. And then you really see, I think, in that theophany, I mean, you see it in God's words as well when he's saying what's going to happen, but especially in that theophany, that strikes me as such a major contrast that like God is active, he's real, and he's kind of all powerful, like that. Good. Like his action is maybe even terrifying. Sometimes. But that's an interesting contrast to me, that even though sometimes it feels like God isn't paying attention or something like that like things are going so bad, how could God have any hand in this world? And then you see the other end of that, or you see what you can't see, like this kind of this revelation, I think, of what you can't see about God. And then when you see it, you're like, oh, that's the exact opposite of what I was worried about.
It's like Habakkuk opened the veil, so you get to see God's response to all these complaints. I mean, we hear people all the time saying, "Oh, your God doesn't do anything. He's not acting at all. Right. If only God would work, or why doesn't God save me when I get sick?" Or things like this. Here's God now opening the curtain so you to actually see what God's doing through history. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. That's one. Okay. How are we like Habakkuk?
I think that's a really good question. And I know, I've been spending a lot of time in Psalm 40 recently. Yeah. And there's a lot of parallels here, I think. My read of Psalm 40 is that proverb in verse 4 that like, blessed is those who make the Lord their trust. That really helps us understand the whole thing. And that Psalm starts with waiting patiently for the Lord. He inclines and hears my cry. Yeah. And that's my understanding is that David is able to patiently wait, even though he's in distress, because he trusts in the Lord. And like that theme kind of continues out towards the end of the Psalm when he's like, basically, I need help again. He's crying out to God again. He's like, don't delay. Like I need, I'm in trouble again. And I think where we are similar to Habakkuk is that in that way, David is kind of how we probably should be. We should be trusting God, and that lets us kind of endure and wait on God, for the solution to our problems. But often we are more like Habakkuk, and we just, when we are in those times, when we recognize kind of evil in the world, things aren't working out the way they should, our assumption is God is inactive or inattentive. Yeah.
That's good. Can you see how this is really a response to those people who sit back and say, "Oh, your God doesn't do anything"? Well, when you look and see what this God can do, you'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay. What do we learn?
And it does kind of put a good flavor on that term we use all the time of like fearing the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
And we don't want that to be afraid of like he's some abusive father or something like that. But like when you see him, there's this awe. And I think fear, there is a healthy fear that's part of that. It can be kind of overwhelming or like, his power is just so beyond us.
Yeah. What do we learn about God in Habakkuk?
Yeah, God is, he is not like us.
Okay.
And the way that we see things, he always has a bigger perspective and a bigger view. We're very limited in our perspective. And I do think there's a certain amount of irony in Habakkuk's question, right? It's kind of like, what's going to happen? Like there's, this wickedness in the world, and you're not doing anything about it. And then God's answer is like, I'm going to punish it with the Babylonians. And then of course Habakkuk's like, well, that's even worse. Like, but that's an answer. Like there is an actual answer there, and I do think that's kind of there. He kind of tips his hand a little bit. Habakkuk does with that later question of like, why would you punish the wicked with people who are more righteous than them? He didn't say righteous. Like, why would you punish the righteous with the wicked? It's like, why would you? I mean, really, he's softening it, I think, as much as you can. But he's really like, why are you using the more wicked to punish the less wicked? Yeah. And so I do think in God's perspective, like, it's just hard for us to see it whenever we're in it. We're in our kind of earthly perspective, seeing things around us, and God can kind of see all, and He's acting to forward His agenda and His will. We just can't see it.
How can we help our faith grow? How can knowing about Habakkuk?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's probably two levels I'm thinking of off the top of my head. One way is we can see this. We can kind of look at it, from our perspective, read the book of Habakkuk and kind of see like, oh, God is active. God is doing these things. He's doing things we don't expect. He's acting in ways that maybe we can't predict, but like there's always something happening and moving forward. Yeah. I think another way we could is we can also be a bit like Habakkuk. We can ask God questions and kind of approach him with these things and say like, I don't understand this. We may not like the answer we get, but I do think there's space for that in our Christian walk to be wrong. To kind of approach God with our misunderstanding, whether we understand that we're misunderstanding or not. Like we can approach and then kind of receive that back as a correction. So I do think there's something. Maybe it's not like the main model we should be trying to pursue for our Christian faith, but when you are in tough times, difficult times, it's okay to ask God, like, why is this happening? Yeah. And you may get an answer, and it may be a hard answer or a tough answer, but I think you can still get that. And that's another way that we grow. And I think kind of the interesting thing with Habakkuk is that maturity that we kind of see over his, over this very short book. Yeah. He part of that is he kind of has like a simple understanding of the world. And by the end, it's a little bit more complicated. Yeah. His understanding of God is more complicated, but I think it's closer to the truth. Yeah. And so there's development there,
Good. Yep. I think my favorite verse is, even though I can't see, although there's no cattle in the stall, there's no fruit on the vine, even though I can't see, I still trust you. And I think that's where God wants us. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's the book of Habakkuk. Yeah. What do you think?
It's great. You've convinced me. This is a great book.
It's taken me a while to figure out what I think Habakkuk is saying. But man, once I figured it out, I thought, man, this hits me right between the eyes. Here I often complain and think things are going bad. And here God's got an answer for that. He says he is working, and just keep your shirt on and watch what I can do. And then sit back and say, oh man, this is an amazing God that we have. So, Well, that's for this week. We've got next week. Oh, I can't remember what's coming. I think it's Nahum. I think it's Nahum. One chapter book, real little, but it's got some interesting things in it too. So
that's good. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tyler. We I think I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah. Looking forward to next week, Dr. Wagner.
Okay. We'll see you. Bye-bye.